Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk cast iron plants. Aspidistra elatior, or cast iron plant, is an evergreen perennial that spreads by underground rhizome, meaning it just gets wider over time. Slowly, very slowly. It can grow pretty wide over time, but it takes a long time for that to happen. So each year it will spread just a little bit. Beautiful upright leaves with kind of parallel veins on them. This is a really rugged plant. Cast iron plants will reach about 2 to 3 feet in height and maybe 1 to 2 feet in width over some reasonable amount of time. Eventually wider than that, but like I say, slow to spread. I got to mention early in this video here that we're just talking about the regular green species of cast iron plant right now. There are a lot of variegated versions of this. We have several in our landscape here in Raleigh, ones with white tips, white stripes, yellow stripes, polka dots, you name it. Some with stripes and polka dots on the same ones. And so those will be covered in future videos. But this is the mainly green cast iron plant that you find at most garden centers. Again, this is a shade-loving plant. They're hardy in zones 8 to 11, but here we are in zone 7B and they do just fine. And I think they'll do fine anywhere in zone 7 that they're in a protected space. A lot of our shady spaces tend to be protected spaces. These are behind a retaining wall up near a house. And so they're absolutely doing fantastic. They'll go through the winter just fine, no problem. So I said they're hardy in zones 8 to 11 for sure, and zone 7 if you're in a protected space. It also makes a great house plant for anyone watching. And so where they need shade in the landscape, because the leaves will scorch if they get direct sun on them, when they come into your house, they need a very bright window. So think of them as, something needs a bright window inside and shade on the outside. We don't really think of these as flowering plants, but they do flower. They get kind of a purplish flower that's kind of soil borne. So it's right down at the very base of the plant is where you would find that flower. So where are we going to use cast iron plants in the landscape? We put them in a landscape job here at the top of a wall where we just wanted something that was evergreen that only would get 2 to 3 feet in height. And this one's kind of guaranteed to only be 2 to 3 feet in height, where other shrubs over time would continue to add height. These will not. Great accent plant, great in dry shade, and that's really important because a lot of our shade plants like moist shaded conditions, and so hosta would go into that group. So this is a great evergreen replacement for hostas. They look great mass planted in a shade bed, and again they'll go under trees and they'll compete with some things that other plants will not. Cast iron plants will take a wide range of conditions other than wet. And so if you have sandy soils, clay soils, all those kinds of things don't matter all that much as long as it's a space that's going to dry out between rains and watering. Really not a lot to think about in that regard. They do need protection from winter winds. Again, our shady spots tend to be protected a bit, so it's probably not a big deal for most folks, but do think through that. This is not a plant that's going to want to be out on a 22-degree night in direct winds. It will burn the foliage on it. If you're in zone 7 or probably 8A, I would spring plant your cast iron plant. Get it well established before it goes into that first winter. These are very drought tolerant, very poor soil tolerant. I do fertilize everything in my landscape in late February, and the cast iron plants will get fertilizer just like everything else, but they probably don't need it once they're established. The only maintenance that you really need to do on these is to go in the late winter and cut out the oldest foliage. So you'll have kind of spent looking leaves that are a year or two old. You just cut those right down to the ground, and new leaves will very quickly replace those during the month of April and May and into June, and it looks much fresher. When I see cast iron plants that don't look that great, I think they're underused and undervalued because of their incredible low maintenance, drought tolerant, evergreen plants that should be used more. I think they're not used as much because folks don't know how to maintain them. Once a year, you need to go through and just cut these old, raggedy looking, spotted leaves down to the ground, and then they look super fresh and really shine in the landscape. These are deer resistant, rabbit resistant, again, drought tolerant and low maintenance. All we do is keep them lightly mulched so we don't end up overwatering. Watering is the real enemy of this plant. So you know, you want to plant it high and dry. Check it occasionally for water, obviously while it's getting established, but for the most part, this is a plant it and forget it kind of plant. Keep the weeds away from it, keep it lightly mulched, and that's it. That's a cast iron plant. Thanks for watching.